Hello, everybody. I hope you weathered the storm. I don't know what the weather was like in Texas, but I can tell you in North Carolina yesterday, we had quite the weather with flooding and wind and all of the things. I hope it missed you all and everybody is safe and sound. But it's great to have everybody here today. I cannot tell you how excited I am about this topic. This is going to be you're in 101 of the topic of organizational recovery, which really is going to be centered on mission, vision, values, and ethics. But what we decided to do is divide it into 101 and 201. So today we're really going to focus on organizational culture. And then at our 201, we're going to dive into mission, vision, values, ethics, and we're gonna touch on values today. So welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, and for those of you who do remember, my name is 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐬𝐞. I am the CEO of a peer-run agency in Charlotte, North Carolina, called Promise Resource Network. I am part of the team here, the amazing team that is putting this together. And you're going to hear from me throughout this presentation and mostly at the end, because we have the opportunity to hear from Darren Acker, who is the Executive Director of Communities for Recovery in your very own Austin, Texas. So welcome, Darren. He's going to be our main instructor for today. Darren, Jesse, and I were geeking out the other day going through this topic because it is such a rich topic and it serves as the foundation for everything else that we're going to do this year. So I hope that you find the information usable. Please make it relevant to you, interact, ask questions. We don't want this just to be 2 hours of getting together just because we said we got together and we wanted to do this. We really want this information to be usable for you. So hopefully you have an opportunity to dig in. Let's make it relevant. And that being said, let's hand it over to Darren. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you. I just realized with the timing of your next one, by the way, I have to comment that the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference, I don't know who's all going to that, is on the 6th, which is the day some of you may be arriving, and has always a great conference offered here in Austin. I know we're all going. Reggie, I see your head. Hi, Reggie, by the way. A lot of familiar faces for me in this group, and people I've seen your names before, and I'm really excited. I've talked to a number of you, know your organizations. And so I am really excited. I will say I'm the Executive Director of Communities for Recovery. We're here in Austin. We have been around for 20 years, starting January 24th. I'm lucky to have been with Communities for Recovery for about half that time. And I've seen some of you come and go as employees too there, and some of you are still there. I will just say on this topic of organizational culture, it's just an incredible thing in terms of how it impacts what you do and who your organization is. And I will just start out kind of reiterating some of what Shireen said, is that this is about what we learn from each other, and I hope what we present is a chance to actually learn from each other. I'm not an expert on this by any way, shape, or form, but I feel like a good experience working in a community that I think we have a fairly strong organizational culture, and I think it's critical in so many ways in terms of your sustainability and your maintenance and your going on. And I think we have gone through a change, and I think many of us have, dealing with or understanding our organizational culture pre-COVID and post-COVID. And we have changed. And I think that's something to think about as you go through this too. If you're an organization that's been around for a while, how do you need to rethink your own culture with the changes and the impact that COVID has had, and the shutdown and all of the different things and other things that have gone on in the community. So I encourage you to think about that, and let's move forward. I'm going to try to get this set up. So I like seeing people's faces in the chat too, but 2 screens and lots of different things. I'm used to being in the classroom with a whiteboard and walking around and talking to people. So talk about some norms. Let's talk about group expectations. You can just click through this. This is part of this is group expectations. I'll just say it's part of the culture of this group, this small group. It'll help set up some of our expectations of each other, and it starts setting the culture of how we interact with and work with each other. These are some things that I like. We can also add some more if we need to. Respect others. Stay on topic. Listen actively. Contribute constructively. Maintain confidentiality. This is going to be published, but in terms of what we share here, we need to make sure that we're sharing something that could be that can be shared publicly, because if this is recorded, we don't want to share something that is private to somebody else in this meeting. Be open-minded. So I want to start out with a question to the group. Why organizational culture matters? What's important about organizational culture? Or what do you think? How does it impact you? What's important about it? Elaine?
Well, I'd like to say that I think it matters because it directs how I represent our organization, one, and two, like how I'm working with folks in the field. Like, this kind of keeps standards going for me, like without even me thinking about it. It's like, oh no, we go this way, we do things this way. So it's, for me, a lot of it is just like an unspoken way of being, because this is always going on.
Great, excellent, excellent. Janet?
Yes, I was going to say something similar to that. It's how we do our work and what is important in our organization, which may be different from some other organization, but in our organization, this is our culture,
Yes.
welcoming and friendly and empowering, stuff like that.
Definitely, definitely. All right, Jess? This is some stuff. I pulled a lot of information. I think you guys hit it. Organizational culture serves as the foundation of an organization's identity and function. What you're talking about, both of you, in terms of how you represent in the community, how you function internally, those things that help you maintain your day-to-day routine and knowing what you're supposed to be doing. And next. It encompasses those shared values and beliefs, behaviors and practices, and we're going to get into more detail with those as we move forward. And it influences behavior, decision-making, and in how we interact with each other. Next. So culture has a profound impact on various aspects of your organization. Let's click through these. Behavior. It shapes the behavior, and as I think I heard Elaine say, how employees and people and participants and volunteers, not just staff, but how everyone behaves in that organization when they're in your building, when they're at your event. That culture that you set up impacts everything there. Decision-making. And I have a story. Once we went through a process at our place in terms of decision-making, we went back and looked at our culture, looked at our values, and said, I know Javi sat through that discussion of paper. We had someone print out a ream of paper. Sounds like a small thing, but everyone was concerned that we're going to lose all this money because we're going to have to start charging at our computer lab for paper, and so how are we going to charge 10 cents for paper? And who is going to collect the money? There's this huge discussion, and boiled down to our accountant said, what are our values? And she said, our values and our purpose in our culture is to support people in finding jobs and finding themselves. How much does a ream of paper cost? $5. Why are we worried about this? Pretty much. It's like, we can let people print as much as they want, as long as they're being appropriate. So in terms of our decision-making process, we got sidetracked. And when our accountant brought us back to our values, we knew kind of, hey, this is what we need to do. So it does impact us in our day-to-day. Next.
Darren, your example, it's such a good example because it requires us to self-reflect and really ask the question, was it about the money? Was it about this level of power or control that we think we need to have in our organizations? Just by asking the question, what is the decision that needs to be made? And what is our values? And let's really check and reflect on why we think limiting paper is the right answer, and where is that consistency or incompatibility with our values. And when we look at that, we might say, oh, you know what? It had nothing to do with money, and it had nothing to do with the paper. It had to do with our own stuff coming into the conversation and getting in the way of us being able to live our values. So I love when you give that example. It's a really great, simple, but important example.
Well, and I think it is, as you grow and as you continue to move on, it also helps to look at certain things, or if you're finding that there's a problem point or pain point in your organization, going back to your culture and values, why is this a problem? Well, maybe we haven't looked at it and compared it to who we are and what are our values, what is our organization. Behavior problems come back to that too, or problems. But we look at behaviors. We came up with community agreements because we'd have problems. Things would happen, disruptions. I don't want to call them problems. We'd had disruptions, and we came up with community agreements based on our values and the culture that we wanted to create.
That's right.
And so we developed those, and we actually go back to those. And sometimes even as a staff member, I think, oh wait, I'm not really paying attention to the community agreements. My behavior doesn't completely align, so I have to check myself. And I think we all do that, but it does help as we work towards that. And then it really affects your identity and reputation. And I think that's critical too. And I think with the people that commented earlier, talking about the identity of their organization and the reputation. I'm always surprised when someone says, hey, you're a safe place. I don't know why I'm surprised, but our reputation is to be a safe place for people to come. That's critical. That's critical to our culture, in terms of being that safe place, which is not judgmental. It may not be that for everybody, and we need to look at that, but that tends to be our identity as a place where you can come, non-judgment, receive services, receive support, and that we accept everyone to the best of our ability. And so I think that's important for us as an organization. I guess I would ask you guys right now, what do you see? How do you feel like your culture is impacted your behavior, decision making, or identity? Do you have examples where this has worked for you in the cultures that you have currently? Reggie, you're muted.
So one of the things about what we do here at Credible Messengers United is that, of course, as our name says, we're credible messenger mentors. And part of being a credible messenger mentor means that we work solely for the person that we're mentoring. So, we don't really work with law enforcement or the probation department or anything like that. And so, and that's part of our organizational culture, that we work with the youth and their families, and we try to be a bridge to their probation officers and stuff. So we don't want to be seen as someone who, is reporting out to the probation officers. We want to be seen as someone who's advocating for them with the probation office.
Great example. We've gone so far, Reggie, with that to say a parole officer cannot just show up in our space. You don't come here to find somebody and hand them a warrant or to be able to do any. This is not that type of environment, right? And so we don't allow probation, parole, anybody with the court system or providers to just show up on site looking for somebody because as you said, Darren, this is your safe space.
Exactly.
This is your place to come to. So I think that's a great example of how you have built an identity, and you want to make sure when you're making decisions and somebody says, yeah, but we don't work with probation, then that's not who we are as an organization. This is the line, and this is where we don't cross it.
Exactly.
Great example.
And again, that goes back to, I think that decision-making process in terms of how you set yourself up and the behaviors, that's your identity, it's your decisions, and it's your behaviors in terms of your organization, in terms of what you do. And they all support each other in terms of developing that organizational culture that you're going to present to the community. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add or share? Arza.
Hi. So, I mean, because your question was like how, making decisions, like our culture, how it affects, and it does, like, so our organizations is Communities for Recovery, and what we provide is we connect peers with the community larger, right? And I coordinate volunteer programs, so very often we have volunteers whose maybe passion or interest is something that we do not provide, right? And I make so, like, because our value is us to connect with a larger community, so that's what I do, even though, like, that's not my job for me to find volunteers, and to find their job opportunities for them around. I would still make that choice and decision just because we stand, and that's what we are. We are Communities for Recovery, and we connect peers with larger community. So I don't know, am I answering the right question?
Oh, yeah.
I thought of.
That gets into our practices, and decisions, and sometimes it affects those relationships and who we have relationships with too. So thank you. Josh. Hi, Josh.
How's it going, Darren? I was thinking through it. One of our values for guiding the work that we do is proximity. It's proximity to the problem, the decisions being made or services provided should be made by those close to the problems that they closely affect. I think it just all the way through, like just about every element of our organization, from programming to services to hiring to decision making. To collaboration, like we focus on that, right, and try to make sure that that nobody who's doing work is too distant from the problem that we're trying to solve, or the people that we're trying to support and help. I think probably everybody in this room can imagine doing peer work. I think that's important aspect.
All right, excellent. Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on. Watching the clock too, not too well, but I'm already behind, but that's okay. We'll get there. All right, what makes up culture? Go ahead and let's click through these: values, beliefs, norms, symbols, and practices. And you can read these if you want to. We're going to go in deeply and look at each one of these as we go through the rest of the session. So let's go to the next slide. Values. Values are the core principles that guide the behavior and decision making. And we talk about values quite a bit. And what we do, and I put this guy in here because I don't know if this is his personal values or the organization he's with, but he puts it right on his sign. I'm here to help. I'm here to be supportive of others. So a value of service to others may be what he's doing here. I also think he's got some funky glasses on, so it's kind of exciting. All right, next. We also need to look at values, and it comes into play in our organizations and personally too. We have personal values, we have professional values, and we also have organizational values. And those can differ. So, examples may be family may be valued, or your leisure may be valued personally. Professionally, confidentiality may be a value. And organizationally, vision or dignity may be a value. Now, there can be overlaps too here between, but there are times that they can be also contrasting. Or they're not a priority. And so, what are your professional values? Because that also gets into ethics. What are your professional ethics? What do you need to do there versus what does your organization require? And so I think we're ready for the next slide. What I'd like to do is let's touch base on personal values. this young woman, they're deeply ingrained beliefs and principles that guide you personally. They are what you use to make decisions in your own life. And they can change as you interact with more people, as you move and are involved in other groups, other activities, and really understand your community is more. But they may start at one place that you get from your family, and they will develop over time. Go ahead. Your professional values have too many clicks in here, I think. Okay. Your professional values are what your profession, it's what you do in the workplace. They're also maybe related specifically to your profession. As peer workers, what are some professional values? What do you think are some professional values that you hold that maybe they're not totally specific to what you do, but what are some professional values that peer work does? Angelina, sorry.
I think one of the important things that we have to remember is like boundaries, confidentiality. Someone just put that in there. I think that those are really important things to remember as professional values.
Oh, hey. Anybody has any other professional values? Are there values that are different professionally that maybe vary from personal? Elaine?
One of ones I normally work with that I guess is really from a personal level is transparency. And it'll be just something simple, like say I'm late for an appointment. And so I'm not telling all these excuses of why I'm late. I'm just telling like my participants or whatever. And that one kills me because it always shocks them that I'm telling them what actually is happening. But it's really no sweat off me, but it starts to establish this pattern of trust with my participants. And I see I'm getting those kind of things back now. It just is, it's much more trusting, but I believe in transparency as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, definitely. Janet.
Ours are put in the chat, just so you know, compassion, another one for trust, and accountability.
Awesome. Janet.
Yeah, I was going to say integrity. I think integrity needs to be in both professional and private, but most of all, I'm thinking of times where I have to admit that I'm wrong, and instead of just letting it slide or whatever, going and putting myself back in integrity by admitting that, I could have handled that differently, or that was not the right thing to do, or, whatever it is. And I think sometimes we hesitate to admit where we might have messed up, that we're human. And I think sometimes that, for me, that's kind of more of a personal value, but I think it goes organizationally as well, but in a little bit different form when you're looking at from personal integrity.
I like the comparison you did there, Janet, between, I think it fits in both the organization, and sometimes it's harder for organizations, versus personal, that integrity, or admitting you fail. And I feel like that's something, I appreciate you saying that a lot, because that's something I've had to learn. And I think it's Brene Brown talks about failing, wonderfully, or, being successful at failing. And you hear that a lot, in other places too. If you're not failing, you're not doing anything,
Well, and sometimes the same principle or the same value can be translated differently. So integrity in our profession might end up being translated differently than integrity as an organization. There's certain requirements and standards organizationally we have that impact our reputation, the quality of the work that we do, a lot of different things where the same value of integrity might be translated different in practice organizationally than it is professionally.
Definitely. Thank you. Reggie.
Yeah, I'll be brief. One big thing with us at CMU professionally and organizationally, I guess you could say, is that, we believe that people that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution. So we want to make sure that, you know, we are giving folks agency, and that the things that we do, the services that we provide are self-directed. So we don't, it's not our job to sit here and just say, hey, this is what you need. It's our job to be like, what can we do for you? What do you need? How can we help facilitate that?
Yeah. Where they're at, that's a core, I think that's a very core value for a lot of us. Janet.
Yeah, I was going to ask Shireen if she could give an example.
So we had an employee that worked with young people, and from a professional integrity perspective, his value was to really engage and develop relationships and create these connections with these young people. And that's right, that's a value of our profession. That's really important. And I got a phone call from a commissioner saying, one of your employees was just driving down the road and with the music blaring and teenagers outside the window singing, right? So here's an example of one of his values about relationship and connection and being authentic was really important. And it competed with an organizational value around the same thing. We want connection. We want all of this authenticity. And the way that gets translated when you're representing an organization ends up looking a little bit different, right? And so it might end up being the same value, but we have to think through, professionally, I believe in this and I agree with this, but there's also a greater mission and a greater effort here that I also represent. And I have to think about it through that lens, not just what I think professionally is acceptable, but what also impacts the organization and how the organization believes that should be translated in the work that I do. Not the best example, but it gives an illustration of how it may be the same thing, but it's going to be different when you are representing an organization.
But I think too, you may have, I also think we look at kind of what our primary values are versus others that may not, you know, and those may vary more in between. Let's go to the definition of organizational values too, but they may vary. So the organization may have, you know, or the profession may have a high, you know, need for confidentiality. Personally, you know, you may also have a value of confidentiality, but that value and confidentiality may vary in some of your personal relationships or how you work personally, or it may not, but it may differ. And so, or it may not be as high a value. You know, other things may be more important to you personally, but when you get into professionally, those are higher, you know, and more important to you professionally. And so it may change how you make decisions. In terms of, you know, and how you act and behave. And so they do vary. Let's go into the next slide, please. We've gotten into this already. Organizational values. They really represent the core ideals and ethics that define the organization and what you stand for. I think we've hit on it here. And some of these, you know, peer-centered is, I think, probably one of the key core things that we all stand for. And then I think of, that always reminds me of a meeting I went to in Austin, where we had all these executive directors and city people talking about what are we going to do? How are we going to address, and this is like 7 years ago, you know, all the people on the streets out in front who are homeless, unhoused, and what are we going to do? And my thought was, well, here's the first problem. None of you are unhoused. None of you are experiencing this. None of you have been there. And so, you know, I mean, if you talk to the people on the street, one of the things I know is I'm tired of being asked questions. I'm tired of being, you know, let's do another survey. Let's count how many people are homeless, you know, let's, you know, and no one has a solution. And you all come in and you pay money for somebody to come in, and then, you know, something happens for 2 months and then we're done. You know, and say, so, you know, we value that peer perspective. We value that peer input, that participation as peers in what we do, say, and breathe. I mean, that as organizations, at least I'm going to assume that, you know, that is a critical part of what we do. and they serve to influence our conducts and our actions, our decision making. We've talked about this. You know, these values align with our mission, vision, objectives, and it also leads into our ethics and priorities for the company. You know, what's most important for us. We could do anything. You know, I think that's one thing that I'll just add in terms of making decisions. There's a lot that needs to be done in this community. There's a lot of things we can do. And so, you know, where do our values and who we are determine, as we develop our mission, what we're going to do? You know, what can we do? And what can we do more? One of our organizational values is ours, as I said, is partnering with other people. And so we work at how do we partner with other people and support what everyone's doing, and how do we become a part of a community to address issues. And that's part of our values. It's also, I'll say this sometime, it's also how we look at partners. And I think this comes into, is a critical point. When you look at an organization's values or an organization's culture of somebody you're working with, do they align? Often I find that when I have trouble working with somebody, their values, the values of that organization, don't necessarily fully align with us. They may not respect the peer support, peer work idea fully. They can say it all they want. They know they have to do it because they're going to get funding, but they don't embrace it, you know? And so we work really hard at representing and teaching people, hey, this is what we believe is important to us, and we want to know what's important to you. And so we try to embed it in with as much of the things we do in our relationships as possible. We have a breakout group right now, which is next, I believe. And some of you aren't talking, and that's okay. I respect people where they want to be and what they want to do or how they're inspired. And so I don't expect people to share unless they can. But I do want to break you out into pairs, which some people may feel more comfortable. I think we're going to take about 4 and 4. I'd like you to get we have a Brene Brown worksheet on values that you should have received. You don't have to use it. You can use it. You've all identified a number of values already, but I'd like you to look at the worksheet, look at some of this, and write down on paper or however you want to do it, values that are important to you, personally, professionally, and organizationally. Take some time, take a look at it. There's no perfect answer. There's no right answer here, but I would like to, we've talked about it already a little bit as a group. I'd like to have a chance to do it individually. So please, let's go with the breakout groups, and then we can come back and share. Anybody have anything they want to share, any insight or something they noticed or values that they, say, hey, these are important, and that they'd like to share with the group? Angelina.
Hi. So I was in a breakout with Reggie, and he talked a lot about like well-being. So I think that that's a really important organizational value that we sometimes forget about. It's important for us to be taking care of ourselves as well as supporting others. So I just wanted to point that out. Just we don't forget to fill our own cups.
Exactly, especially as leaders. I'm reminded by a lot of people, we can support well-being of the people working with us or for us, or in our team, but we also have a responsibility, and there are people that have to remind me of that too. So thank you. I definitely thank you. Elaine.
Hi, I'm sorry, I talk a lot.
That's great.
I was with Juan Carlos Perez, and we discussed a couple of things actually, but I raised my hand because at the very end I was talking about another thing, and this is from Brene Brown's list. I saw equality, and I put a lot of that stuff together. So I put equality like with respect, and I was saying, you know, well, first of all, I realized in this that I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Dignity and forgiveness. I realized for myself, I'm not traditionally a person that forgives, like in my personal life, but I realize in a working relationship, I've really grown a lot with that. And a lot of my reasoning, like when I'm working with peers or participants, is I never want them to feel like there's no way of coming back from whatever has happened. Like that there's always room to come back. Like even if maybe we didn't have such a great session or something, the next time we're speaking, we'll address that a bit. Maybe there's some apologies or whatever, talking about how we were coming from it, but we move on with you know, respect and dignity for each other, and just leaving space to always come back for that. And yeah, I need to start putting that more in my personal life and not holding on to grudges.
Thank you, Elaine.
you.
You never talk too much. Appreciated. Janet.
I'm the one that talks too much. Yeah, we were talking, I was with Chris, and we really didn't list values, but we talked about how the values that you hold personally sometimes is in conflict with the value of the organization,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to people that are on staff. Because, you know, personally, I want to support everyone to succeed and be good, you know, and not be good, but be all that they can be. And yet, if they're not doing that, then on staff, if they're disrespecting people and not holding the values of prosumers up, to them, it seems like we're saying two different things. They say, like, you value them, but you're not treating me that way. But it's different because you're an employee first, and then we do peer. You know, it at least that's the way I think of it, and maybe I'm thinking of it wrong. Chris talked about collaboration, which I really liked, but I think there is a point in time where what you value as an organization sometimes has to supersede what you feel as a person. I don't know. I would welcome other people's comments on that.
I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that's it is a common conversation that I know at the supervisory level in particular that we have in terms of working with our organization, and that recognizing that difference, and then how do we adjust for that. You're right on target, I think. Chris, good day. Nice seeing you.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, I was in the breakout room with Janet, and one of the things that was in the back of my head while we were discussing this was, you know, we often strive for, in terms of like collaboration, in terms of value, is utilizing a parallel process when we do supervision periodically. I mean, you have one-on-one supervision with people, but it's really getting individuals to flex their muscles and thinking that way. But the thing that was in the back of my mind is when we start to evaluate values from a personal, professional, and an organizational perspective, that naturally leads into ethical thinking structures. So it informs the ethics, not just from the professional guidelines of peerness, but also the ethics of the organization and how we apply those ethics, how those ethics are practiced on a day-to-day basis. And I think, you know, being able to clearly identify those values is really going to inform what our organizational ethics are drawing from the professional ethics. And then we're able to weigh out our personal values at the end of that. So that was just what was in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I think well said. Thank you, Chris. I know I think I found a little bit of peace in as we recognize that and work through issues and challenges and where I'm at, and then I think it's critical, and it's also something that you do on a regular basis. It's not a one-time thing. It's a constant process. So thank you. All right.
Yeah, and can I just add one more thing,
Yes,
Darren? I mean, to the whole point, I think what we keep landing, at least what I'm hearing, is how do you translate those values and ethics into practice? And it might be the same value. The value might be the same, but it's translated different in this organization, or it's translated different in your professional conduct than it would be translated in your personal life. Right. And so I think that, to me, where the rub comes in, where I see there can be a breakdown of peer support, is really supporting people to think of themselves as a professional. How does voice and choice translate as a professional? It doesn't mean that I can choose to just show up at work whenever I want. That's a misuse of the value of personal choice, right? How do you take that same value, and what does that mean as professional conduct, or how does that, what can you expect that translates like in your profession? There are certain things that you don't have a choice of. And even though we value choice, I think, as Chris, as you were saying, it might seem in conflict, or Janet, it might seem in conflict. It's not that the value's in conflict. It's the way that it then gets operationalized is going to be different in your personal life than it is in your work life. And it's different for folks that we support than it is for folks that are employed with us.
Definitely.
Yeah, really
Different
quick. I think what I'm hearing and what we're landing on is that context is going to affect your interpretation.
That's right.
Yes.
So your interpretation personally in your personal life and your personal relationships is going to be maybe broader or more narrow in certain senses than it would be in a professional context, which has guidelines that allow for allowable behavior. And then you have policies and procedures that further confine that add to that context.
That's right.
And you may have governing bodies or funders or outside relationships that even impact that additionally. You know, and again, it goes back to navigating and recognizing the difference and making in that decision-making process too, and practices. So thank you. So, all right, let's get started. We got I want to get 15 minutes in, and then I want to actually give you out in a project too. So beliefs. I went to a lot of pictures, a lot of work on seeing what we could do for beliefs, and this is one of my favorites. It represents a belief for some of us, not necessarily all of us as kids, but some of us as children. And so the belief here is what? It's
the magic of Santa.
The magic of Santa. And so beliefs are those views and ideas, perspectives that we hold to be true. And so this little boy at his age probably holds Santa to be true. Maybe not quite yet. I don't know. I grew up in a home where Santa was a big deal. And so when I was 3 or 4, believe me, I believed it. When I was listening one night on the couch waiting for Santa to come, because we were at my grandparents' house, and I heard this noise. And as I got older, I realized it was the dog snoring. I was sure it was Jingle Bells, and I was going to have to fall back to sleep. I mean, I believed it completely. And you know, even as we grow older, you know, we think that belief may not be true, but still we tend to hold on to some of those things, and then it moves into that magic of Christmas or that magic of Santa, and it changes. But it is one of those things that we truly hold as a view and idea, and it's important to us, and it shapes our personal experiences. Or it's shaped by, our personal experiences, or upbringing, our education, and other influences. And it includes religion, it includes philosophy, it includes politics, it includes opinions. And it isn't necessarily completely factual. you know, and it doesn't, it isn't, but it shapes how we view the world, and it can change as we interact and work with others. And so this is a critical part of developing that culture is, what are the organizational's beliefs? What is an organizational belief that we have right now that I think we hold? I personally believe it's true, but what is, you know, kind of one belief, it goes back into values. What is one belief that you think we hold as organizations in the work that we do? Angelina.
We believe that we support the community.
We support the community, yes. Janet.
We believe that everyone can recover.
Definitely, definitely, excellent. Melissa.
That each person is responsible, not responsible, but knows best for themselves what to do.
Yes, self-directed. They know what's best for them. Excellent. Reggie.
Yeah, and along those lines, we believe that those that are closest to the problem are closest to the solution.
Definitely, definitely.
That's right. Jesse had people have inherent value and worth just for existing.
Is it Shauna? Did I say it correct? No.
Shanna.
Shanna, okay.
That everyone deserves respect.
Everyone deserves respect. These are core beliefs that we have. They're part of, and all of these relate to, I mean, you're going to see some relationship between, you know, values and beliefs. You know, we have a belief where I work. Oh, Stormy, go ahead, please.
We believe in second chances.
Definitely, definitely, totally. Excellent. Some of the other things, we believe in all pathways, multiple pathways. That gets back to self-directed. As a recovery organization, you'll hear we have that. You know, there are some. What are some beliefs that we may not have that other partners may have? You know, I think that's another thing. I don't want to go too negative, but some places, and some of you may believe that abstinence is the only way of recovery, and that's a challenge within our organizations right now. For a lot of us, is where do we sit with that? On the mental health side, I think there's some relevance there too. You know, I think another belief is if you have a return to use, you need to go to treatment, or if you have a return of symptoms, you need to get more medication. You know, these are beliefs that institutions may have that we see with other people we may work with that may not be necessarily beliefs we have, but they're there. And and so we work through that, and it does affect us in terms of the work we do.
It drives it too. I mean, you know, one of our beliefs is confinement is harmful. We do a lot of work to prevent incarceration, and that's not only jail and prison incarceration, but it's psychiatric incarceration, because we find that incarceration, confinement is harmful in so many different ways to us as human beings. So everything that we do is to prevent, divert, or create alternatives to confined spaces for people. Not the prevailing approach that we have in our criminal justice system or our mental health system, but it is our belief as an organization.
And it can affect who you work with and how you work with people.
That's right.
Totally, definitely.
One Carlos Pro said, people have the right to dignity of risk.
Yes. Oh, Carlos, that's critical. Definitely. Does everyone understand the dignity of risk too? Carlos, I don't know if you want to explain that a little bit more, but that's I've been hearing that more in the last 6 months or so. And I think it's critical.
Sure, I believe it falls in with autonomy support, right? Allowing someone to make that decision, good or bad, and being able to navigate out of that consequence.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Great. I'm going to keep us moving a little bit. Norms, I'd like to get into there. Can we talk a little bit about norms? And this is for all of you. I think we're all from Texas now. But I'm going to ask a question about this picture in a second. Norms provide specific guidelines about our behaviors that are acceptable or unacceptable in an organization. They outline what is considered acceptable or appropriate conduct in social contexts and in different settings. They influence the behavior in interactions and social dynamics within a community or organizations. Norms also help maintain order, cohesion, and consistency within a group. And I'm going to say, for me, this goes back to that idea of Stormin and Norman. If you've anyone heard of Stormin and Norman, when you're put into a new organization or a new place, or new group of people get together, there's Stormin and Norman, meaning we don't understand each other yet, so there's a storm. You know, we may have conflict until we start norming and we start understanding how we're going to work together as a group. Now with this nice lady here, if she asked you something, how would you respond to her? Or is there a certain word that would be included if you responded to her? Said, hey, would you get me a cup of coffee? It would be yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, yes, sir. I didn't experience that as much in the North. I'm from Iowa. We didn't see that. When I came down here, it took me a while. And I have this personal belief that it's ingrained so strictly that in particular, ma'am seems to be stronger from what I hear, because I get yes, ma'am myself more than I do yes, sir. I will get yes, sir. I will get Mr. Darren. When I was working with young kids, I get Mr. Darren, Mr. Darren, Mr. Darren. It took me a while to understand that too. The other thing, a norm that, you know, I recognize, and it works when we work with people, and let's go to the next slide too, is when we have people who've been incarcerated that come into our program, and we have staff who've been incarcerated. And I see often early coming out is, you know, I mean, sir to me is often someone younger referring to someone older, typically. And I will have a 70-year-old man refer to me as sir, and that feels uncomfortable. It goes against the norm. And I recognize the norm that has been ingrained in them with incarceration. Or the other term that comes out that's really hard for me to hear is boss. Yes, boss. It's like, oh, I mean, and so working through that, you know, and that norm that they have been taught in an environment they've been in, and that my response is, my name is Darren, please feel free to call me Darren. I don't want to shame them for what they're saying. This is what they know, but my name is Darren. It's, you know, and so that's our norm. It's calling people by their first name. And when you know, that's what we do. But it does happen. What are some other examples of norms that you guys experience? And Melissa, is your hand up for this too? Okay. Anybody want to actually, Janet, go ahead. What are some examples of norms?
Well, and I grew up in Texas, and I even, when the dog is in my way, I say, excuse me, sir. And even to my dog, I mean, it is so great. And when people ask me not to call him ma'am or what, sir, or whatever, it is the hardest thing not to put that on there, because it's just automatic. So
and
I don't know if that was the kind of example you were looking for, but
no, it is. And I think, you know, and I will say, for me, I respect that some people, that's just the way it is. That's where you are. So if you're going to call me sir, fine. If you're going to say boss, that's fine. But I want them to know you can call me Darren. You know, that's where I feel more comfortable, and that's okay. Stormy.
Okay, so a norm for me in personal life, people have always thought we were weird about this. My family, we always say I love you, regardless if it's on the phone, when we're leaving. I don't care if we've come in and stayed 15 minutes and leave again. It's always I love you. And I've had people always say, why do y'all say I love you so much? And I was like, that's just something that we grew up doing, no matter if it was a phone call or in person or whatever. We always said that, like, every time. So
That's a good one.
I love
Is that
that.
Is that a norm for anybody at work? Mine's us too, Darren. We use the word love all the time.
I don't say we use it all the time, but we do use it. And I have a board member, every time I talk to him, he gives me a hug and he tells me he loves me. And that has opened me up to that practice a little bit more. Hugs is a discussion we've had in terms of our own organizational culture, which is a challenge. When you get into norms, you discuss that. Are hugs appropriate? When do you hug? How do you hug? You know, I mean, you look at trauma and being trauma informed and personal experience in different cultures. You know, hugs is a big conversation that really you
is.
can have in your communities. Elaine.
Yes, I too am referred to as sir a lot. But in that, when you were saying that, I was thinking a norm from where I'm from are children don't speak. Children don't speak unless spoken to. And so there's like this heavy rules around children, right? Something I grew up with, and I find myself constantly trying to break that one, like being conscious of I don't personally have children, but I work with a lot of people that do, and of course their kids are going to come in and interrupt and this and that, and so I find myself having to get out of my own norms that I don't actually like having. They're just ingrained in me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yolanda?
One of my norms is really everything y'all been saying. And two, when someone sneezes, I'm like, bless you. I don't care where I'm at or where they at. I always say, bless you.
Awesome.
Before it's the hug part, I like to do that. It's because you never know when you may see that person. That person may not be here tomorrow. So that's why I love you. You know, that's just.
I love that.
That's
I
how I
think
am.
it's so true. Thank you. Stormy.
Yes, I served a family, well, I worked with a family, and the norm was for the grandmother lived with them, and she would always make tea or coffee for the guests. And, you know, our organization says we can't accept anything from our families that we serve, and I was young and new and didn't really understand. So I would say no, and she stopped meeting with me in the sessions because I offended her. And then I asked the mom, like, hey, what happened to grandmother? And she told me. And so from then on out, I was like, you know what? I'm going to have this cup of tea or coffee with her because I understood that it was part of their norm, and it kind of helped for them to kind of like accept me into their home.
Great example.
That's excellent. And one of our norms, I think it's also a practice at where we work, is we give everyone free coffee. Coffee is part of that connection, and it was a discussion. Hobby, if he's still here, remembers that too. We used to charge for it. We don't anymore. And that's part of our norms. I think I don't want to. I think there's some 12-step groups have norms that keep them functioning. That when you go in there, they may also contradict some of what we do.
That's right.
I say they're wrong or right, but they're different. And so, you know, I think we see that in there, you know, hi, my name is, you know, everyone seems to know that. So that's a part of the culture becoming, and really, you know, we talk about this, they help us work better together. And there are some other, you know, we have a norm too, or it used to be, it's norms have changed since Zoom. Did anybody have trouble figuring out the norms of Zoom? I mean, we talk about Stormin and Norman, you know, you're all raising hands. You're doing a wonderful job with that. You know, there's a lot of, sometimes if you don't do that, there's over talking and, oh, please, yes, you know. And so that raising your hand is a norm that we've developed to function better in a Zoom relationship. And so we've got these going on, and they do reflect our organization. We can go to the next one. Great conversation, though. I think we need to do this. I need to split it out even more because I think we could get deeper into all of these.
We sure could. I put a question in the chat, Darren, while we're switching slides about, do you hug in your organization? Curious. No judgment either way. I'm just curious about people's responses to that. And we have Melissa who said, yep, as long as the person's okay with it, we hug in our organization.
I think we do it on a personal basis. Angelina.
Yeah. So we do hug in our organization. I try to practice asking permission before. I had spoken to Reggie in our breakout before, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to meet you. And I was like, oh, by the way, I'm a hugger. So just so you know, and I am a very big hugger. I feel like that's where you can transfer energy to other people. And so I always ask permission before, hey, is it okay if, I give you a hug? Some people have told me no, and that's fine. Some people just aren't comfortable with you being close to them in that manner. I feel like we do that in our organization, but I always make sure to ask permission first, being respectful of the other individual.
All right, there's this conversation going on in the chat. I don't know if anybody should be shared.
Yeah, it was just, it led to a conversation about hugs, and Javi was saying, I'm from South Texas, and when we meet someone, we say hello with hugs and a peck on the cheek.
Yeah.
So when you move from Laredo to Austin, you realize that was not the norm in Austin. And I was saying, yeah, I actually do that too, and I'm not from South Texas at all.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'm gonna keep us moving. We're gonna change some things up as we end too, I think. But I wanted to show this because this is something, and I wanted to show both sides of politics. That's Barack Obama and that's George W. Bush, and they're both showing a norm with actually the same person. It turns out that there was a challenge with. I mean, if you remember this, people kind of got up in arms about this. And so norms can cause conflicts, and understanding those norms. The Bush family, I'm told, has a relationship with Saudi Arabia and has friends in Saudi Arabia and connections there. And part of friendship in some cultures between two adult men is to hold hands. And it's also a sign of respect working with somebody older. So George Bush here is holding the king of Saudi Arabia. I don't know his name off the top of my head right now, but holding his hand. It caused some problems. Same thing with Barack Obama. I think there's some discussion about, was he really bowing or was he looking at something? But he did this too in Japan, where, oh my gosh, the president of the country should never bow to somebody else. And there's some discussion about that. But these are two things where it may be a norm, but you have to decide, is it right or is it not? And I think the hug conversation gets into that. How do we do that? In our building, one of our norms is to greet people, but we also had a situation where someone said, well, hello, ladies. And that's how, greeted people by gender. And that was her norm. And and it's like, as she got into realizing that not everyone identifies with one gender or another, and or their gender may not be relevantly obvious. And so really working in terms of what is our norm in terms of how we greet people and how we engage people that is respectful with our values, but also still continues that desire to have a friendly, open space, and calling somebody by something that makes them feel uncomfortable impacts that feeling of belonging, feeling of welcome, even if that's what you're trying to do. And so being mindful of that in terms of those different things. And I think the hug is actually an excellent example too, in terms of when it's appropriate, and how do you ask permission. So thank you. We can move on. I think we've had a lot of good conversation about that. Symbols, and symbols are also a part of our organizations in terms of how we reflect our values. A smile can be a symbol. When you come into the room, smile on your face, and how we greet people is a symbol. The other thing is signs, in terms of how you see it. This mural to the left, some of you may know, who are Austinites, may know a little bit more, but Masontown was started in East Austin by the Mason brothers, I'm told. This is a mural that's up honoring them. And it's a community, a post-Civil War community. They bought property, and a lot of people, a lot of African-American Black individuals migrated here from Georgia and other southern states to live in this area. And it had a really strong culture and community for many years. Since then, I'm told that it's not nearly as strong or nearly as noticeable, but it's still a part of this community. And so they put up a mural to represent that culture and that history of who they are and what their community was. And so we can do that too as organizations, and that represents us too. Signs can also be ways we represent and promote our values. And it's not just what the signs say, but also looking at how signs say stuff. Do not enter, staff only. There's some challenges when we say things like that. And how do we give direction you know, promote ideas that may have some limits to how people are what people are able to do, that doesn't, you know, talk down, show disrespect, separate, alienate, remove from that peer idea that we're all peers working together. And so it comes into what you write. And so these are all symbols of your organization. I put our logo in here. You can't see it all, but you know, our logo is a symbol of who we are. We have a little swiggly blue line. That's the creek. We started out as volunteers at the creek, Shoal Creek, and so we still have that to remember where we came from. We have the tree and the, you know, the growth. We're a community, and in recovery, we're growing, we're developing. And so these are things that we put in our symbolism. And I put a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee is often a symbol of friendship, welcome, you belong here, I respect you, let's talk, you know. And so these are all different symbols. What other symbols do you guys have or see in your organizations that you think reflect who you are? Anything else? Janet.
I know, Janet, can you hear us?
Yes,
Oh,
I can
yep.
now.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, our symbol is bamboo, because bamboo can stay dormant for hundreds of years, and then given some encouragement and stuff, it can grow a foot a day. And so that is why we have bamboo as our
Awesome.
symbol.
I didn't know that. Cool. Thank you. What are other symbols? What other ways do we symbolize our values, our culture, for our organizations or our communities or individually, family? What are symbols we see? Reggie.
At CMU, we included in our logo the colors red, black, and green, which are usually associated with like Africa or something like that, simply because we are embedded and we are part of a very old and rich African-American community here in Third Ward. They call it Third Ward, Texas. That's it. So yes, and so those colors do kind of represent where we're from and what we represent.
That is excellent example. Colors can be a symbol of who you are. Totally. Wonderful. Thank you for saying that. Anybody else? Anything you'd like to add? Let's move on.
Before you move on, this is such an important point I want to make,
Okay.
and I'm hoping everybody's with me and listening. The opposite is also true. You can bring signs and symbols into your environment that are completely contrary to the values that you assert. Here's an example. I might make some folks uncomfortable or angry, but that's okay. I will go into peer-run organizations and they will have values around equity, equality, non-hierarchical environment, not having power over, but having power with. And I'll walk in and there will be signs about do not smoke, ask staff to enter this room, or staff only bathroom spaces. When we bring into our environments signs like that are incompatible with our values, it actually negatively impacts the way people perceive themselves and the way people perceive us. And so what I ask people to do is walk through your space through the lens of the person walking through the door, not the person sitting behind the desk, and through the lens of your values, and see what your space looks like through that lens, and think about removing the things that are not consistent or compatible with who you are and bringing in things that are. This symbol issue is just so important. Okay, I'm done.
No, and in so many different ways, you know, what does that reflect? And is it inclusive of, you know, the cultures in your community too? You know, I think it's critical. Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
Just really quickly, I wanted to remark on something Darren had said with regard to his smile. Actions are symbols too. So for instance, are you using a staff bathroom or are you using the same bathrooms that everybody else uses? Is there a separate place for the staff to take a break? Or are you taking your meals with people that you serve, right? Like those are all things I think that are symbolic of the way that our services are carried out. And so it's not just
for instance, multimodal discourse in terms of images or symbols on a wall, it's also conducive with regard to our action, which can be hurtful or it can be helpful.
That's right.
Absolutely. I agree. Janet, did you want to add?
Yeah, just a quick little point too. If we say everyone's welcome and you walk in and your posters or your things are all of people of one race, you may feel excluded. So even the pictures that we hang or the posters that we put up, making sure that they're inclusive as well.
And I'm going to throw in, then I'm going to get to you, Pamela, because you just triggered something for me that has been. We have somebody we work with, and everybody is young, pretty, and slim, and it's like, okay, oh, and white too. I mean, that's part of it too. And it's like, okay, I fit one of those things, in my mind anyway.
You're not that pretty, Darren.
I know. So, but it affects who the pictures we take, the pictures that we put up, and the things we do. And we don't want to be tokenism either. I mean, we need to believe in this. We need to be doing it. But we also need to make sure we reflect that. And really, it's a symbol. I'm going to go a step further. It's who we hire. Does who we hire reflect our community and our culture?
Oh, yes, thank you. I was just going to add that I feel like this is the perfect way to I guess get your point across is to practice it, right? Like this is a way that a good leader can lead by example, do the things that everyone else is expected to do right alongside them. That's how our organization works. We do a lot of side-by-side work. So my responsibility is the same responsibility as your responsibility. So I think it's a good way to kind of instill that in other people is when you are leading by example, letting people know oh, hey, I use the same bathroom you do, or I eat my meal in the same table that you eat your meal. So I think that's really important to remember is, that's how people see is, when you're leading by example.
Thank you.
Well, I want to add to this whole conversation that part of this is about self-reflection. We are here to challenge ourselves and open up our worldviews around the values of peer support. So this is why we started by saying our personal values versus our professional values versus our organizational values. There are values that are embedded as peer supporters and peer-run organizations that we want to make sure that when we are translating that into our agencies, we are living our values. What happens when we start looking like other types of agencies, like agencies that segregate people, like agencies that call the police and have people hospitalized, like agencies that default to incarceration, like agencies that don't represent the values that our history, which is a social justice history, what we were gifted. When we don't live that as peer-run organizations, what ends up happening is somebody comes behind us and says, well, they're doing it over there. Angelina's doing it, so that's okay. And they're a peer-run organization. Well, Darren says it's okay to have, segregated spaces or whatever it is. So we have to make sure for the work that we are doing in this space as leaders of peer-run organizations that we are taking those values that were gifted to us and we are translating them into practice. And there are some things as leaders we are going to be challenged around because it is inconsistent with where we came from. It's inconsistent with the message that we want to give to the community and the perspective that we represent as people with shared experience. So I hear some of the conversations. I can tell you 85% of our team members have felony backgrounds that have come from prison. We work with people that are unhoused. We work with people with mental health issues, developmental differences. We work with the same community. And it's really critical to us to not create a segregated environment that says staff are sanitary, but people coming from prison aren't. Or staff are okay because we can take care of our own physical health and we can use the same bathroom, but people that live on the streets are not. So just keep in mind, everybody, as we go through this whole process, the thing that's going to weave through every course that we teach is going to be the values of peer support. Whatever other values you bring into the conversation or bring into the work, those are those values. Our code of ethics are not the same as social workers or licensed clinicians. Our code of ethics are not the same as parole officers or probation officers. We are talking about peer-run organizations in this process.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, and then I'm going to step into practice, and I think we're going to do some wrap up after that too.
What a wonderful conversation. I really want to remark really quickly that pureness is translated in how we lead as well. So everybody that I work with understands that I will never ask them to do something that I have not done or will do myself.
That's right.
In particular, I think it's important with pureness, if we're going to lead, there is an element of leading from the front and incorporating those practices into our everyday activity as leaders first, because that incorporates the role of modeling that really it is part and parcel. One of the most foundational elements of peer support is modeling and modeling that behavior. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I think that leads right into people are coming home from school, if you can't see behind me, and work and stuff. But it leads into, for me, the practice, and how do we put these things into practice and what we do. And then I think that's an excellent example. As a leader of my organization, I try to be at events. I might be setting up tables. I might be, quite honestly, maybe clean the bathroom if we need to do something. I mean, it's you do the dishes, and you model that for other people, and you not necessarily model like I'm special, but this is our responsibility, and I go back to something that someone noticed about our organization once, and I don't know if we're doing this as well, and ours will say we got some issues with putting stuff away, but they came in for our staff meeting to evaluate our organization, and they were going to meet with us. And didn't think about it, but the staff meeting ended and everyone got up, put their chairs away, put the tables away, and they cleaned up the room and they took care of everything. And they pointed out for me that that's a norm, it's a practice, it's a value of shared responsibility for our space and for our organization. And we all are responsible. We could leave this to the director of operations or, the person who, but no, we take care of our space because this is ours. This is sacred in so many ways. And so I think that's where our practices get in. I threw up some pictures here because this is us now. I'm going to share us a little bit. We value self-care and being a part of a group. And there you are. Sorry, I didn't get permission, but no, we put this up this is in our permission area of work, but this is our staff getting out, not just working all the time, but doing things socially every once in a while to relieve some stress. We have some pictures here. We can see Elaine in here in the bottom. We have a practice of truly not saying no. We pretty much always say yes. I like that wording that better too. We typically try to say yes to things. And so if someone says, I want to do this activity, we'll say, yes, let's make it happen. And this happened to be a couple staff members wanted to do this. And so we had a Black African-American health and recovery speaker meeting event. And we let people do what they want to do. Sean here with his bagpipes is a staff member who said, I want to take back St. Patrick's Day. It's seen as a drinking holiday, green beer, all those things. He says, I want to take back St. Patrick's. I'm Irish, Sean O'Brien. You may know him, with a name like O'Brien. He wanted to do something different on St. Patrick's Day. And so he said, okay, let's do it. And allowing people to have responsibility, saying, yes, let's try it. Let's jump in. Sure, why not? So these are things. And then we have two little staff members here that are extremely important. And I'm going to jump on and I'm going to wrap this up, but they're extremely important because staff are allowed to bring their dogs there. Baby has been there as long as I have, the little Chihuahua on the right, and Lenore on the left. Lenore, they both have a way of being a part of our building. They represent our culture in so many ways and accepting that. And that's part of who we are. But there are different ways we have practices. And I think we've talked about some of that, you know, that things that we operationalize, that how do we make those values relevant, and how do we practice those values and support those values in our culture, in our organization. And so Regina. Is she there? Regina's phone, I don't know who that is, but all right, so we can go on to the next one. We're going to wrap up now.
I'm sorry.
Go.
This is Regina. I was having a hard time getting to the mic.
No worries.
Okay, I just briefly wanted to say, you know, I really appreciate this platform, you know, because the conversation that we're having, I was like, oh, okay, when we were sharing about the bathroom, and I was like, okay, that makes sense. And then when you come back, Shireen comes back with, you know, so it's very necessary for me, you know, to hear the different views and perceptions, and to be reminded of the conversation that we're having and what the conversation we're having around peer support, you know, and what we really represent and what we're, you know, trying to do. So I really appreciate everything that's being said, because it's helped me a lot, you know, because I can get caught up in, you know, because of my belief system or because of things that I'm accustomed to doing, and it's my norm. So I see absolutely nothing wrong with it and can justify it. But in light of peer,
Yes,
you know, support, you know, we have to be able, and like you said, and we spoke last time when we were here on this platform about leadership, you know, so it's all falling in place and making, you know, I'm just grateful for this entire platform and conversation, and I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina. And this is, you know, this is us doing it, and I will just say this needs to happen in our organizations. It's not happening in my organization enough, and you know, and we need to do this. This needs to, you know, and we are going to be revisiting this, and it needs to continue. And this is about being a peer. Actually, I think it's about being a healthy organization. My personal belief is peer organizations are healthy organizations, and more organizations and businesses need to be like us, period. But
agreed.
That's my belief, you know.
Agreed. And we represent a profession, we represent a history, we represent a set of values, we represent a mission, and we represent a movement. So if we are going to call ourselves peer support, peer organization, or peer leaders, it is exactly what you're saying, Regina. We all come with our set of beliefs and biases and all of those. We are not discounting anybody's personal belief system. We are taking the translation of the values of peer. And how does that look in an organizational culture? So I appreciate you uplifting that and pointing that out. I'm always going to be the provocative one. I'm going to tell you, I'm always going to be the one to say things that might feel uncomfortable or unpopular, but that's okay. I'm not going to shy away from it, because I want us to really constructively think about our actions, our organizations, how we operate. If we are going to be connected to this movement, there are certain things that are expected of us, and self-reflection becomes part of that.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, and I think, you know, being able to share and to being able to express that, but also what accompanies that for, I think, is grace, and that grace for each other and grace for ourselves and forgiveness for ourselves. You know, I will say something stupid, guaranteed. You know, I mean, I shouldn't say it that way, but I will mess up. Well, you know, it happens. I fail, you know, and learning, that's something I've had to overcome, learning to fail. And so giving grace to myself, giving grace to other people, you know, as we go through this, but also respecting them to share what you're feeling. Respect is about sharing what you're feeling or what you're experiencing too. And then it goes as we develop as organizations, and I think it what makes us strong, much stronger. We had an activity, no way do we have time for it. That's okay. It goes back to something someone told me, there's too much to do, you'll never have enough time, and that's okay. Yeah, that's okay. It's just, I mean, if you want to do this on your own, we gave you the SAMHSA definition of recovery. You may already know that, the 4 major dimensions of recovery and the 10 guiding principles of recovery. I encourage you to take a look at that and think about your values, beliefs, norms, symbols, and practices, you know, and what encompasses a recovery community, you know, with what we have in place. Shireen, I'm going to let you talk about the other tool and instrument, and I'm going to just, I think, turn it over to you and say thank you. You know, I will see you guys next Wednesday. We may come back with some more stuff. We'll get into mission, vision, values, and ethics there. And this conversation, just part of the importance and the power of this conversation is you continue to have it.
That's right.
We don't have all the answers today.
That's right. And we don't shy away from it. And that's part of this, right? Is that we have the courage to be in dialogue with each other. We're gonna go through this section. We'll go in next time. We'll just carry it over. It's no worries. We would much rather this feel meaningful and valid to all of you than to rush through it. What you're going to expect is that Jesse's going to send this out, though. She's going to send you an assessment. If you have the ability between now and the next time we meet, take a section of the self-assessment and reflect on your own organization. There are 7 different domains that this self-assessment covers, from the way we are greeting people to our physical environment to how we are resolving conflict. There's a lot that goes in it that reflects the 10 dimensions of recovery. We will go through the 4 dimensions. We will go through the 10 recovery elements, and then we are going to go through that evaluation, that self-assessment next time we meet. But you're going to get you're going to be sent a copy of it. Between now and then, if you can self-reflect on your organization, you can do the entire thing if you want. It's not going to take that long. Or you can pick a section and just focus on that section. But we're going to do some of that together when we come back next time.
Excellent.
I just want to say thank you to all you for doing your presentations and working in this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you too, all of you.